The rain falls softly on the glass windows of Seoul National University Hospital, each droplet carrying with it the weight of unspoken dreams. Inside room 304, 26-year-old Park Min-ji sits perfectly still, her delicate fingers tracing the edge of her hospital gown as Dr. Kim's words echo in the sterile air like a death sentence wrapped in medical terminology. 1 year, she whispers to herself, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. Maybe less. The rare genetic condition that has been silently claiming her life cell by cell finally has a name, and with it, an expiration date. Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, with a genetic mutation so rare that she's only the 3rd case documented in South Korea. Her heart, once strong enough to carry her through countless nights of studying for her literature degree, now beats irregularly, each rhythm a reminder of borrowed time. Min-ji had always been the type of person who lived quietly, like a whisper in a world full of shouting. She worked part-time at a small bookstore in Hongdae, spent her evenings writing poetry that no one would ever read, and dreamed of traveling to places she'd only seen in the novels that lined her tiny studio apartment. She was the girl who noticed the way autumn leaves caught the light, who remembered the birthdays of acquaintances, who left encouraging notes in library books for the next reader to find. But now, as she walks out of the hospital and into the bustling streets of Seoul, Min-ji feels invisible in a different way. She feels like a ghost already, moving through a world that will continue spinning long after she's gone. The neon signs of Gangnam blur through her tears, as she wonders how to fill 365 days with meaning when she spent 26 years barely living at all. That's when she literally runs into him. Well, more accurately, that's when Kang Jun-ho's motorcycle nearly runs into her as she steps blindly into the crosswalk, too lost in her thoughts to notice the traffic light. The screech of brakes and the angry honking of cars behind him snap her back to reality, just as a strong hand grabs her wrist, pulling her back to safety. "Are you trying to die?" he shouts over the noise of traffic, his voice rough with adrenaline and irritation. Min-ji looks up into the face of a man who seems to embody everything she is not. Where she is soft and ethereal, he is sharp and intense. His dark hair is tousled from the motorcycle helmet he's just pulled off, and his leather jacket speaks of a life lived on the edge. But it's his eyes that catch her attention. Dark brown eyes that seem to hold storms and secrets. Eyes that have seen too much for someone who can't be much older than she is. "Maybe," she whispers, the honesty of her answer surprising them both. Junho's anger falters at the broken quality of her voice. He's used to people being afraid of him, used to the reputation that follows him like a shadow through the underground racing circuits of Seoul. But this girl, with her hospital bracelet still attached to her wrist, and her eyes that hold the weight of the world, doesn't seem afraid at all. She seems lost. "Well, don't do it in front of my bike," he says, but his voice has lost its harsh edge. "Find another way." Something in his tone makes Min-ji look at him more carefully. Beneath the leather and the attitude, she sees something familiar, the look of someone who understands that sometimes living hurts more than the alternative. "I'm sorry," she says, and means it. Not just for nearly causing an accident, but for the sadness she sees reflected in his eyes, for the way his shoulders carry tension like armor, for whatever brought him to this moment of understanding. Junho finds himself studying her face, noting the pallor of her skin, the way she seems to be holding herself together by sheer will. There's something about her that makes him want to stay, to ask questions, to understand why a girl who looks like she's made of moonlight and poetry would step into traffic without looking. "You okay?" he asks, and the gentleness in his voice surprises him as much as it does her. Min-ji almost laughs at the question. Is she okay? She's dying. She has no family, except for an aunt who lives in Busan and calls twice a year, and she's just been handed an expiration date like a carton of milk. But looking at this stranger who stopped to make sure she was safe, who's looking at her like she matters, she realizes that in this moment, she might be the closest to okay. She's been all day. "I will be," she says. And for the first time, she means it. Junho nods, but he doesn't move to leave. Instead, he glances at the hospital behind her, at the bracelet on her wrist, at the way she's clutching a folder of medical papers. He's been where she is, in different ways, in darker places. He recognizes the look of someone who's been handed news that changes everything. "You hungry?" he asks suddenly, the question surprising them both. Minji blinks. What? Food? You look like you haven't eaten in… Well, like you haven't eaten. He gestures to a small pojangmacha, a street food stall, set up on the corner. My treat. Consider it an apology for almost running you down. Minji knows she should say no. She doesn't know this man, doesn't know why he's being kind to her, doesn't know if she can trust the way her heart skips when he smiles. But she also knows that she's tired of being alone, tired of carrying her fear by herself, tired of living like she's already dead. Okay, she says. They sit on plastic stools at the pojangmacha, sharing tteokbokki and listening to the sounds of the city around them. Junho tells her his name, and she tells him hers. He learns that she studies literature and works at a bookstore. She learns that he fixes motorcycles during the day and races them at night, that he lives alone in a small apartment in Itaewon, that he's been on his own since he was 17. What she doesn't tell him is that she's dying. What he doesn't tell her is that he's been looking for a reason to live. What's your favorite book? He asks, watching the way her eyes light up when she talks about stories. Right now? The Alchemist, she says without hesitation. It's about following your dreams, about the universe conspiring to help you achieve what you truly want. Junho makes a sound that might be laughter, but it's edged with bitterness. Sounds like fantasy to me. Maybe, Minji says, stirring her tteokbokki thoughtfully. But isn't that what makes it worth believing? The possibility that something magical might happen. He studies her face in the glow of the stall's lights, noting the way she seems to find wonder in the smallest things, the way she talks about dreams like they're real and achievable. It's been so long since he's met someone who still believes in magic that he's forgotten what hope looks like. What about you? She asks. What do you dream about? The question catches him off guard. Dreams are luxury items he gave up long ago, back when he was sleeping in subway stations and stealing food to survive. Dreams are for people who have the time and safety to believe in tomorrow. I don't, he says simply. Everyone dreams, Minji insists gently, even if it's just to dream of dreamless sleep. Something in her voice makes him look at her again, really look at her. There's a wisdom in her eyes that doesn't match her youth, a sadness that runs deeper than disappointment. She talks about dreams like someone who's running out of time to chase them. What about you? He asks. What do you dream about? Minji is quiet for a long moment, thinking about the list she's been mentally composing since leaving the hospital. All the places she wants to see, all the experiences she wants to have, all the ways she wants to matter before she's gone. I dream about living, she says finally. Really living, not just existing. I want to see the sunrise from Namsan Tower, eat street food in every district of Seoul, learn to dance, write a story that makes someone cry, fall in love. She trails off, embarrassed by her own earnestness. Those don't sound like dreams, Junho says. They sound like plans. What's the difference? Dreams are what you think about. Plans are what you do. Minji considers this, thinking about the medical papers in her bag, about the ticking clock that now governs her life. She has plans now, whether she wants them or not. The question is whether she's brave enough to turn her dreams into plans too. Maybe you're right, she says. They part ways that night with an exchange of phone numbers and a promise to text each other. Junho watches her walk away, noting the way she moves like she's carrying something heavy, the way she stops to look up at the stars barely visible above the city lights. He finds himself wondering what her story is. What put that shadow in her eyes? What made her step into traffic without looking? Minji walks home to her studio apartment, her mind full of leather jackets and motorcycle engines, and eyes that seem to understand her in ways she doesn't understand herself. For the first time since her diagnosis, she goes to sleep thinking about something other than dying. The next morning, she wakes up to a text from Junho. Still alive? She smiles as she types back, unfortunately. His response comes immediately. Good. I know a place that serves the best kimchi jjigae in Seoul. You free for lunch? And so begins the most important friendship of Minji's life, though neither of them knows it yet. Over the following weeks, they fall into a routine of sorts. Junho picks her up after her shifts at the bookstore, and they explore Seoul together like tourists in their own city. He takes her to Hidden Gems, a tiny cafe in Insadong that serves coffee and books, a rooftop garden in Hongdae where you can see the entire city spread out below, a night market in Dongdaemun where vendors sell everything from vintage clothing to homemade jewelry. Minji shows him the Seoul she's been quietly loving for years, the way the Han River looks at sunset, the secret spot in Bukchon Hanok village where you can sit among traditional houses and feel like you've traveled back in time, the library in Gangnam where she used to study and dream about becoming a writer. They don't talk about the big things at first. They don't talk about why Minji sometimes gets dizzy and has to sit down, or why she carries heart medication in her purse, or why she seems to be trying to fit a lifetime of experiences into a few months. They don't talk about why Junho has scars on his knuckles and a wariness in his eyes, or why he never mentions family, or why he races motorcycles like he's trying to outrun something. Instead, they talk about books and dreams, and the way certain songs can make you feel like you're flying. They talk about the taste of first snow and the sound of rain on windows, and whether it's better to be remembered for being kind or for being brave. Can't you be both? Minji asks one evening as they sit by the Han River, sharing a bag of bunjeopang and watching the city lights reflect on the water. I don't think I know how to be kind, Junho says, and there's something vulnerable in his admission that makes Minji's heart ache. You're kind to me, she points out. That's different. How? He's quiet for a long moment, trying to find words for feelings he's never had to explain before. You make it easy, he says finally. You don't expect anything from me. You don't want me to be someone I'm not. You just see me. Minji understands this better than he knows. She's spent her whole life being overlooked, being the quiet girl in the corner who notices everything but is noticed by no one. But Junho sees her too, really sees her. Not just the surface but the depths, the dreams and fears and hopes she keeps hidden. Maybe that's what kindness is, she says. Just seeing people for who they really are. It's during their 6th week of friendship that Minji finally tells him the truth. They're at her apartment, and she's been trying to hide how tired she is, how much effort it takes to keep up with their adventures. But when she stands up too quickly and nearly faints, Junho catches her and refuses to let her deflect his concern with jokes. Minji, what's wrong? He asks, his voice serious in a way she's never heard before. And don't tell me you're fine. I know what fine looks like, and this isn't it. She looks at him, this man who has become her closest friend, who has filled her days with laughter and adventure, and the kind of connection she never thought she'd find. She thinks about the medical papers hidden in her desk drawer, about the appointments she's been making with specialists, about the way her heart sometimes skips beats, like it's forgetting its job. I'm sick, she says simply. How sick? The question hangs in the air between them like a challenge. Minji has been practicing this conversation in her head for weeks, trying to find the right words to explain something that has no right words. The kind of sick where they give you a timeline, she says finally. Junho goes very still, his hands still on her shoulders from when he caught her. What kind of timeline? A year, maybe less. The silence that follows is deafening. Minji watches emotions flicker across Junho's face. Disbelief, anger, fear, something that might be grief. She waits for him to let go of her, to make excuses about why he can't be around someone who's dying, to run like she expects everyone will run when they know the truth. Instead, he pulls her closer. Why didn't you tell me? He asks, his voice rough with emotion. Because I wanted you to see me as alive, she whispers, not as someone who's dying. Minji. He says her name like a prayer, like a promise. You're the most alive person I've ever met. And in that moment, something shifts between them. The careful friendship they've been building becomes something deeper, something that doesn't have a name but feels like coming home. Minji realizes that she's been falling in love with him slowly, like the way seasons change, so gradually that you don't notice until suddenly everything is different. I'm scared, she admits, the words coming out in a rush. I'm scared of dying, but I'm more scared of not living. I'm scared of wasting whatever time I have left. I'm scared of being alone. You're not alone, Junho says, and his voice is fierce with certainty. I'm here. Whatever you want to do, wherever you want to go, I'm here. Why? She asks, because she needs to understand, needs to know that this is real. Because, he says, and pauses like he's trying to find the right words for something that goes beyond words. Because before I met you, I was just surviving. I was going through the motions of being alive without actually living. You changed that. You made me want to dream again. Minji feels tears streaming down her face, but they're not tears of sadness. They're tears of relief, of gratitude, of a love so overwhelming she doesn't know how to contain it. "I love you," she says, "because time is too precious to waste on fear." "I love you too," he says back, and kisses her forehead like a benediction. That night, they make a list. Not a bucket list. Minji hates that term, hates the way it reduces a life to a series of experiences to be checked off. Instead, they make a list of moments they want to create together, memories they want to build, ways they want to love each other while they have the chance. The list includes big things: traveling to Jeju Island to see the sunrise from Seongsan Ilchulbong, learning to tango, writing letters to each other to be opened in the future. But it also includes small things: having breakfast in bed on rainy mornings, taking photos in every photo booth they can find, teaching each other their favorite songs. "I want to meet your family," Minji says as they're writing. Junho's pen stops moving. "I don't have family. Everyone has family, even if it's not blood. Not me." Minji studies his face, noting the way he's closed off, the way he's retreating into himself. "Tell me," she says gently. And so he does. He tells her about parents who saw him as a burden, about a father who left when he was 12, and a mother who followed 2 years later, leaving him to fend for himself. He tells her about sleeping in subway stations and PC bangs, about learning to fight and steal and survive on the streets of Seoul. He tells her about the racing circuit that became his family, about the mechanics who taught him to fix engines, and the riders who taught him to go fast enough to forget. "I've never had anyone to introduce to family," he says. "I've never had anyone I wanted to introduce." "Well, I want to meet your racing family," Minji says. "And I want you to meet my aunt in Busan." "She's all I have left, but she's enough." Junho nods, understanding that she's not just talking about meeting people. She's talking about weaving their lives together, about making their love real and visible and shared. The next few months pass in a blur of adventures and quiet moments, of laughter and tears, and the kind of love that transforms everything it touches. They travel to Jeju Island, where Minji stands at the edge of Seongsan Ilchulbong and watches the sun rise over the ocean while Junho holds her hand and promises that every sunrise from now on will be for her. They learn to tango in a small studio in Gangnam, where Minji discovers that she loves the way dance makes her feel powerful and graceful and alive. Junho discovers that he loves watching her discover herself, loves the way she glows when she's happy, loves the way she makes him want to be better than he ever thought he could be. They write letters to each other, dozens of them, hundreds of them. Love letters and funny letters and letters about dreams and fears and the way certain moments feel like they could last forever. Minji writes about the way Junho's eyes crinkle when he really laughs, about the way he makes her feel safe and seen and cherished. Junho writes about the way Minji has taught him to notice beautiful things, about the way she's shown him that love isn't about possession, but about celebration. They take photos in every photo booth they can find, creating a visual diary of their love story. In the photos, you can see them falling deeper in love, and see the way they look at each other like they're the only two people in the world. Minji keeps copies of all the photos in a special album labeled Evidence of Joy. But it's not all adventures and grand gestures. Some of the most precious moments happen in the quiet spaces between. The morning Minji wakes up to find that Junho has filled her apartment with flowers because he knows she's been feeling weak. The evening they spend just lying on her couch and talking about everything and nothing. The night she has a panic attack about dying, and he holds her until she remembers how to breathe. "I'm not ready," she whispers into his chest on one of her bad days, when the medication isn't working and her heart feels like it's beating wrong. "I know," he says, and his voice is steady even though she can feel the way his heart is racing. "But ready or not, we're here. Right now, in this moment, we're here together." And that becomes their mantra, their anchor in the storm of uncertainty. Right now, in this moment, they're here together. Junho introduces her to his racing family, a collection of mechanics and riders and street philosophers who adopt Minji immediately. She brings homemade kimbap to their late-night gatherings, listens to their stories about close calls and broken hearts and dreams deferred. They treat her like a little sister, protective and gentle and proud. "She's good for you," Taemin, the garage owner, tells Junho one evening as they watch Minji laugh at something one of the other riders said. "I've never seen you smile like that." "She's good for everyone," Junho replies, and realizes it's true. Minji has this way of making people feel seen and valued, of finding the light in everyone she meets. They visit Minji's aunt in Busan, a trip that Minji has been dreading because it means telling someone else about her diagnosis. But Aunt Soo-jin, a retired teacher with kind eyes and a practical manner, takes the news with grace. "How long?" she asks. And when Minji tells her, she nods like she's processing a difficult but solvable problem. "Then we make it count," she says simply. "All of it. Every day, every moment, every breath." She takes to Junho immediately, perhaps recognizing in him the same fierce protectiveness she feels for Minji. "You take care of her," she tells him, not as a command, but as a sharing of responsibility. "I will," he promises. "And you let her take care of you too," she adds. Love isn't about one person saving the other. It's about two people choosing to be brave together. As winter melts into spring, Minji's condition worsens. The good days become fewer, the bad days more frequent. She has to cut back her hours at the bookstore, has to rest more often, has to accept that her body is failing her even as her spirit soars. But Junho adapts with her. He learns to read the signs of her fatigue, learns when to push her to try new things, and when to simply hold her while she sleeps. He moves into her apartment without discussion, and suddenly her tiny space becomes a home filled with love and laughter, and the kind of companionship that makes everything bearable. "I want to write a book," Minji tells him one morning as they're having breakfast in bed, her head on his chest and his fingers running through her hair. "What kind of book?" "A love story, but not a sad one, a real one. About us, about all of us. About finding love in unexpected places. About the way love can transform everything. About the way some people come into your life and change everything just by being themselves." Junho is quiet for a moment, thinking about the way Minji has changed his life, about the way she's taught him to hope and dream and believe in beautiful things. "I think that's the most important kind of story," he says. So Minji begins writing, pouring her heart onto pages, creating a love story that captures not just their romance, but the way love ripples out and touches everyone around it. She writes about the way Junho's racing family welcomed her, about the way Aunt Soo-jin's eyes lit up when she saw how happy Minji was, about the way the bookstore owner started recommending romance novels to customers after watching Minji glow with love. She writes about the way love makes you brave, about the way it gives you permission to be fully yourself, about the way it teaches you that life isn't about the number of days you have, but about the depth of joy you can find in them. As spring turns to summer, Minji's energy wanes, but her spirit remains strong. She and Junho create new traditions for her limitations. Picnics in her apartment when she's too tired to go out. Movie marathons when she needs to rest. Quiet conversations about dreams and fears, and the way certain loves feel eternal, even when they're temporary. "I want to marry you," Junho says one evening, as they're watching the sunset from her apartment window. "Junho," Minji says, her voice gentle but sad, "I can't ask you to be a widower." "You're not asking. I'm asking. I want to marry you because I love you, because you've made me believe in promises and forevers, and the way some things are worth fighting for even when you know you'll lose." Minji looks at him, this man who has become her everything, who has shown her what it means to be loved completely and without reservation. She thinks about the traditional path, the long engagement, the big wedding, the assumption of decades together. Then she thinks about the path they're on, urgent and precious, and more real than anything she's ever known. "Ask me again," she says. "Park Minji, will you marry me? Will you let me love you for whatever time we have? Will you let me be your husband and your partner and your best friend for every day we're given?" "Yes," she says, and kisses him like it's the first time and the last time and every time in between. They plan a small ceremony in the bookstore where Minji works, surrounded by the stories that have shaped her life and the people who have become their family. Aunt Soo-jin cries through the entire ceremony. The racing family cheers when Junho kisses his bride. The bookstore owner provides books instead of rice to throw, because Minji has always believed that stories are more powerful than tradition. Minji wears a simple white dress that makes her look ethereal and radiant. Junho wears a suit that makes him look like he's stepped out of a fairy tale. They exchange rings and vows and promises that acknowledge the reality of their situation while celebrating the miracle of their love. "I promise to love you every day we have," Minji says, her voice strong and clear. "I promise to make every moment count, to find joy in the small things, to be brave because you make me brave. I promise to cherish every second with you," Junho says, his voice rough with emotion. "I promise to hold your dreams as carefully as I hold your heart, to make you laugh when you're sad, to remind you every day that you are the most beautiful thing that has ever happened to me." Their honeymoon is a week in a small pension in Nami Island, where they walk among the trees and talk about their future in terms of seasons instead of years. They plan for autumn adventures, for winter quiet, for the spring they might not see together, but will always carry in their hearts. "I'm not afraid anymore," Minji tells him one morning as they're watching the sunrise over the water. "Of dying, of not having lived. You've shown me what it means to be alive. Really, truly alive." Junho holds her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair, memorizing the feeling of her in his arms. "You've shown me what it means to love," he says. "Before you, I thought love was something that happened to other people. You made me believe I was worthy of it." As summer fades into autumn, Minji's condition worsens significantly. The doctors talk about treatments and possibilities, but Minji has made her choice. She wants to spend whatever time she has left living, not fighting a battle she can't win. "I want to finish my book," she tells Junho one evening as they're lying in bed, her head on his chest and his fingers tracing patterns on her arm. "How does it end?" he asks. "With love," she says simply. "It ends with love winning, even when it seems impossible." "That's not how life works," Junho says, but there's no bitterness in his voice, just sadness. "Maybe not," Minji agrees, "but it's how love works. Love doesn't end just because life does. Love becomes part of everything it touches." In her final weeks, Minji completes her book, a beautiful, heart-wrenching story about finding extraordinary love in ordinary moments, about the way some people come into your life and change everything just by being themselves. She dedicates it to Junho, who taught me that love is not about time, but about depth. She also writes letters to Aunt Sujin, to the racing family, to her co-workers at the bookstore, to people she's met along the way who have touched her life in small but meaningful ways. She writes about gratitude and joy and the way love ripples out into the world like stones thrown into still water. But most importantly, she writes to Junho, not one letter, but dozens, to be opened on specific dates and occasions. A letter for their first anniversary, a letter for his birthday, a letter for when he's sad, a letter for when he's happy, a letter for when he's ready to love again. "I want you to promise me something," she tells him one evening as autumn settles over Seoul like a golden blanket. "Anything. Promise me you'll keep dreaming. Promise me you'll keep believing in beautiful things. Promise me you'll let yourself be happy. Minji, promise me you'll love again. Maybe not the same way, maybe not as deeply, but promise me you'll open your heart to the possibility of joy." Junho wants to protest, wants to say that no love could ever compare to what they have, but he sees the urgency in her eyes and understands that this is important to her. "I promise," he says, and means it as much as he's ever meant anything. Minji dies on a Tuesday morning in November as the first snow of the season is falling outside her window. She dies peacefully in Junho's arms, with Aunt Sujin holding her hand and the racing family gathered around her bed. She dies having been loved completely and having loved completely in return. Her funeral is a celebration of her life, filled with flowers and stories and the kind of laughter that comes from remembering beautiful things. The bookstore owner reads from her novel, which will be published posthumously and become a bestseller. The racing family tells stories about her terrible cooking and her infectious laugh. Aunt Sujin speaks about the way Minji could find joy in anything, could make anyone feel special and seen. But it's Junho who gives the eulogy that everyone will remember, who speaks about the way Minji taught him to dream, about the way she showed him that love isn't about possession, but about celebration, about the way she made every day they had together feel like a gift. "She had a year to live," he says, his voice steady despite the tears streaming down his face. But she made it worth everything. She made it worth a lifetime. After the funeral, Junho finds himself back at the Pojangmatcha, where they first shared a meal, ordering tteokbokki and remembering the way Minji's eyes lit up when she talked about dreams. He thinks about the promises he made to her, about the letters waiting for him at home, about the way she wanted him to keep believing in beautiful things. For the first time since her death, he allows himself to imagine a future. Not a future without her. She will always be part of everything he does, but a future where her love has made him brave enough to keep living, to keep dreaming, to keep believing that some things are worth fighting for, even when you know you'll lose. He pulls out his phone and scrolls through their photos, stopping at one from their wedding day. In the photo, Minji is laughing at something he said, her eyes crinkled with joy, her whole face glowing with love. She looks radiant and alive and absolutely beautiful. "Thank you," he whispers to the photo, to her memory, to the way she changed everything just by being herself. "Thank you for making it worth it." And as the snow continues to fall over Seoul, Junho begins to understand that this is not the end of their love story. It's the beginning of how love lives on, how it transforms everything it touches, how it makes even the briefest lives feel infinite. Minji had a year to live, but in that year, she lived a lifetime of love, and that love will continue to ripple out into the world, touching everyone who knew her, everyone who reads her story, everyone who believes that love is worth fighting for, even when time is short. Because sometimes, the most beautiful love stories are not about growing old together. Sometimes, they're about growing deep together, about making every moment count, about loving so completely that a year feels like forever, and forever feels like just the beginning. And in the end, that's exactly what Minji and Junho did. They loved completely, they lived fully, and they proved that love doesn't end just because life does. Love becomes part of everything it touches, and their love will touch hearts for generations to come. The snow falls softly on Seoul, and somewhere in the city, someone is falling in love for the first time. Someone is dreaming of tomorrow. Someone is choosing to be brave. And in a way, that's Minji's greatest gift. Not just the love she shared with Junho, but the way that love taught everyone around them to believe in beautiful things, to make every moment count, to remember that life is not measured in days, but in the depth of joy we can find in them. She had a year to live, but she made it worth everything.